earth-shattering stuff. Broke late last night. Financial Times coming out saying that Cantor Fitzgerald was essentially bankrolling a new startup that would compete with MicroStrategy, that would accumulate Bitcoin massively. This idea that there would be another or could be another MicroStrategy, obviously on the face, a big deal. Saying it'll accumulate as much as $3 billion worth of Bitcoin. We know now they will have 40,000 Bitcoin to start, so they will be the third largest treasury company. Let's just get into your fast reaction before we dive into the details here. A second MicroStrategy.
It's a MicroStrategy clone for sure. It looks like a MicroStrategy clone funded by SoftBank and the Tether money. So with a Wall Street component, and that's the Cantor Fitzgerald part. Everyone knows, of course, Howard Lutnick, a speaker at Bitcoin 2024, current Secretary of Commerce. So it puts all these people in place, Japanese major venture capitalists with some tech bros from people that we all recognize, the Jack Mallers, and then, of course,
well, for me, the Jack Mallers piece was the thing that really sealed it. Of course,
let's get to that. Let's hold off on the Jack Mallers part because there's a lot to unpack. That is the biggest part. You're right, but I don't want to get right into that. I think there's a few pieces before we get into the tech part that's important. But indeed, this MicroStrategy clone part, for me, first up, the Japan part. I think we got to talk about the Japanese component of this, SoftBank being involved. And because this brings, we've seen Lutnick with the trade wars. We've seen the market reaction to Liberation Day, Trump's trade war that we started last week in America with all these other countries. It was an extreme case. We saw contagion hit all parts of Wall Street. How many people in the past 2 weeks have said something broke? And now you see Japan. Of course, we saw a trade deal coming out with America and Japan about to be finalized. But Masahiro-san, who's involved in this, is sort of one of the great financial pumpers of all time. This guy was behind WeWork. If everyone in America remembers WeWork, he was writing checks like crazy to keep them solvent over the years. What I think is very interesting, though, enter this into that whole trade war talk. Of course, we saw Cantor Fitzgerald and Lutnick. He's a big a hawk when it comes to this trade war. He's one of the people that says giving bad advice to President Trump. So combine the trade war, the Japanese element, and the stable coins, and suddenly it's not just a MicroStrategy clone. This looks like a ship designed to chart through the waters of change that have been announced by the Trump administration the past few days. This looks purpose-built to survive a reorganization of global finance. Already Bitcoin is leading in that narrative. Of course, Bitcoin is leading in that narrative. But to see these huge pieces organize themselves around Bitcoin in order to traverse this market fluctuation, huge market change, the biggest market change people have said we've seen in 80 years since Bretton Woods or the end of the gold standard. So watching Bitcoin be the organizing principle for real huge institutions, the biggest Japanese VC fund, the biggest stablecoin issuer, and a real Wall Street player, to me shows that Bitcoin really is that life raft, really is exactly what we've all been saying for years, because these guys are putting their money where their mouth is and they're treating Bitcoin in this way. And I find that to be the most interesting part of the story.
Yeah, I would start with the players, right? If you're going to put together a competitor to Strategy, Michael Saylor's company has amassed over 500,000 Bitcoin by some reports, on track over the next 5 years to maybe even hit 1 million. Maybe it'll land around 800,000 Bitcoin. I mean, you'd certainly start with these people. SoftBank, I'm not as familiar, so appreciate the context there. But Tether, the behemoth of the stablecoin space, you're talking about one of the largest buyers of U.S. Treasuries that's ever existed, kind of coming bootstrapping from nothing over the last 10 years. This is a company that seems to be diversifying and buying shares of soccer teams and alternative fuel investment companies, like really putting that money to work in creative ways. Obviously, huge to see them and everything that's, I think the future is bright for Tether. We've talked about that on this program. But last but not least, I would say Jack Mallers, right? So the idea that you would have a front man for the band, who carries sway in the Bitcoin community, who's deep in the technology, right? Somebody who, started Strike, which was one of the fastest growing startups of the last cycle. Obviously, we'll kind of return to that. And I think that's the big hanging chad here, to use a dated expression of what is the future of that company. But obviously for somebody who's in the market, right, you think about, okay, you're going to start a MicroStrategy competitor. Well, I can just buy Strategy, right? I can just buy Strategy as an ETF. I can buy one of these Misty type dividend products books, or all those sorts of things, right? Or I could buy one of the other 15, 20 companies on the market, right? Whether that's Assembler Scientific or, a cooler or something more exotic, in the foreign markets. If you're going to put a US based strategy competitor together, you got to build a super band. And with Lutnick as well coming in, from the kind of institutional and really just, this wouldn't be Howard Lutnick himself, but his son who's running the company, right? It just, you're putting a tremendous amount of Wall Street capital together. So it feels like, if something is going to be real, first, I never thought we'd see a strategy competitor of this size. So this seems to signal that Wall Street might want that, right? There's a market there, but if you're gonna do it, this is who you put together, right? So I think maybe I would start there as saying like, an impossible task, impossible mission, mission impossible.
No, well, in this case, I see obvious advantages. MicroStrategy, people say, oh, it's a company, it has cash flows. It's kind of exhausted those cash flows that MicroStrategy generates to buy Bitcoin. That was sort of the 2020 version of MicroStrategy. Right now, it really is a Bitcoin holding company for all intents and purposes. I don't want to diminish what's going on at MicroStrategy. I'm not trying to ignore it. But that's why they're issuing all these new debt instruments and bonds to go out and buy the Bitcoin, because their cash flow is tapped out. It's already accounted for. They've already bought the Bitcoin with it. When you look at what's going on with these folks, these aren't cash flow businesses, but SoftBank in the Japanese sense has access to cash that isn't just this, go to your central bank and get cash and get it at a low interest rate and then go buy Bitcoin with that. It isn't necessarily debt they're going to have to use. Look at Tether. Tether's cash flow is one of the best and most interesting cash flow machines in the world. I mean, they literally print
they are a
money.
money printer.
They are an actual money printer.